So hello, welcome to my presentation on building the Great Pyramid of Giza. I'm Will. So I'm going to start with a question. How old is the Great Pyramid of Giza?
Very.
So who thinks it's older than 2,000 years old? Yes. Who thinks it's below 10,000 years old? All right. Put your hand up if you think it's between 2 and 3,000 years old, 3 and 4,000 years old, 4 and 5,000 years old. All right, 6 and 7,000 years old, 7 and 8,000 years old. All right. All right. Anyone want to take a random guess? It's somewhere between 4 and 5,000 years old. All right, I'll give up. So the actual answer is 4,575 years old. Next slide. So it was built during the Old Kingdom of ancient Egypt, which was the second kingdom. You got 9 kingdoms. The 3 most prosperous kingdoms were the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom. So I've highlighted in red the periods when pyramids were built, and then in yellow the region where pharaohs were buried in the Valley of the Kings. Next slide. So Khufu's pyramid. First talking about Khufu. So this is the only 3D depiction of Khufu. It's a tiny, 10 centimetre statue in the Museum of Cairo. Everything we know from Khufu was written on walls in the Luxor temple, and based on Herodotus' history. He was an ancient Greek historian. So this is his cartouche, his name. Normally it's written horizontally and you read it right to left. So you got the sieve there, which is either pronounced KH or CH. Then you got the 2, what they're called? They're called quail chickens, which is the vowel sound, so it's written as W, but it also can be U. Then you got the horned viper, which is F. All right, next slide. This is just a map of ancient Egypt. So the Giza pyramids just outside Mondo, Cairo, next to the first capital of ancient Egypt, Memphis. And then later, the Valley of the Kings, that's in Luxor, near the second capital of ancient Egypt, which is Thebes. And down here you got Aswan, which is where granite was quarried, which was used in the construction of the pyramid. So that was put on wooden barges and sailed all the way up the Nile. Next slide. So this is the size of the Great Pyramid relative to the University of Sheffield. So it was the tallest building until the 1300s, when the Lincoln Cathedral was marginally taller. So it was 146.5 metres tall, which is double the height of the Arts Tower, and it's 230 metres side length. Next slide. So it's also 50% taller than Big Ben. And it was orientated in this way, almost exactly facing north to only a deviation of 0.2%. Next slide. So this is the interior of the pyramid. This is what makes Khufu's pyramid the most interesting, because every other pyramid only has this one subterranean burial chamber, whereas Khufu's pyramid has the Queen's chamber and the King's chamber. And you've got the Grand Gallery, which is an impressive internal structure leading up to the King's chamber. So one reason why they might have built 3 chambers was in case Khufu died during its construction. So it's estimated that it took 20 years to build, which is only 3 years shorter than the reign of Khufu. So had he died in the first 10 years, he may have been buried there, and then that Queen's chamber, and then finally the King's chamber. Although the Queen was actually buried there, he had 3 wives who were buried in smaller pyramids just next door. You've got these shafts here, which used to be thought that they were air shafts, but now it's thought that they have a ceremonial role. The idea that his spirit would ascend through these shafts up to the heavens. Next slide. So this is the outside of the pyramid. You've got the entrance here, and down there you've got the entrance which the grave robbers tunnelled in. And then on the right you've got the Grand Gallery, which is a 26-degree slope. And it's unknown what the role of the Grand Gallery is for. Next slide. So you may not know this, but initially it would have been finished with fine white limestone, and it would have been smoothed off. You got one of these tracing stones in the British Museum, and you can see a few right at the base of the pyramid, which would have made it a very impressive sight. And then on the neighbouring pyramid, you can see there's still a few of these fine white limestone blocks at the top. It's believed that these fine white limestone blocks came off the pyramids in an earthquake in the 1300 AD. So each of these blocks weighs 2.5 tons, which is apparently the weight of an adult giraffe, and it's and 50% more than a Ford Mondeo. So yes, put your hands up if you think the pyramid was built by slaves. All right, now put your hands up if you think it was built by skilled labourers. All right, next slide. So I'll get to that question later. Before, I need to show you about the King's Chamber. So it's got very impressive 60-ton granite blocks, which, as I showed you on the map before, were taken all the way up the Nile on the barges. So the King's Chamber itself is a rather impressive square room, which means that it's got a huge amount of weight on the ceiling, which is why it's got these relieving chambers above, which spread the weight across. But during construction, they noticed small cracks in the roof, so they built from the top of the Grand Gallery a tunnel to investigate. And in these spaces, there's actually some ancient graffiti of Khufu's cartouche. Right, next slide. So the answer was actually skilled workers. So I think only two people got that right. In 1990, archaeologists uncovered the workers' village nearby, and a 2010 study of their bones showed that half of them were female, which indicates that they formed permanent sort of households, and there's 23% children. The investigation showed that they were well fed. They had meat, beer, and bread. On the right here, you've got a statue in the British Museum of the architect, who was the most important official in all of the ancient Egypt. He had the title Vizier. And then you've got these. This is in the Western Park Museum. You got the hammer, which was used to round off the initial blocks, and then the polisher, which was used later for the finishing touches. Next slide. Right, so now I'm going to talk about the different theories about how the pyramid was constructed. So the initial theory by the 5th century BC Greek historian Herodotus was that they used cranes similar to the shadoufs, which was still used in modern-day Egypt to transport water up the bank of the Nile. But this is frankly a preposterous theory because the blocks weigh 2.5 tons, and it would be ludicrously difficult to lift them using cranes. All right, next slide. So a theory which persisted for a while is the idea of a large straight ramp. Basically, you put the blocks on wooden sledges and you pull them using rope. So does anyone have a theory, an explanation why a disadvantage for this? Yes. Well, that's part of the reason why. Yeah, Richard.
It would take longer to build the ramp in the pyramids.
Yes. Due to physics, the maximum slope would be 8 degrees, because as you increase the slope, it becomes increasingly harder to build the pyramid. In fact, I think you need about 50 men at a 5-degree slope, but you need 400 men added 10-degree slope. So that means that this ramp would be a mile long. And also, because the pyramid's so tall, it'd have to be very wide at the base, and then so that at the top there's actually enough room. And this overall means that the ramp would be larger than the pyramid. And also, there's no actual physical room in Giza to build this ramp. Although it's crossed that plateau, there's no space. And it would double the construction time. Right, next slide. Now, one theory, which I believe to be true when I played the computer game as a child, was that they put the 1.6 miles around the pyramid in a corkscrew. Does anyone have an idea why this might not be the case? All right, so it's quite a complex idea. Basically, with this, you wouldn't be able to monitor how the corners meet. So you would end up with a twisted pyramid at the top, as in order for the corners to meet, there'd be slight deviations in exactly the orientation. And also, it'd be difficult to attach the actual earth to the side of the pyramid. And also the 60-ton granite blocks, they would require 600 men to lift up this 7-degree slope, and it'd be difficult to corner with that number of men. All right, next one. So this is an interesting idea I came across, which I hadn't heard much about previously. It's an idea that you could actually attach wooden tracks to the outside of the pyramid, which is a 51-degree angle, and then you could have men in two teams actually walk down the outside of the pyramid, pulling rope, which is then goes around a pulley and pulls the blocks up. They think that you need 5 separate stations of these, so you'd have to swap the rope as you're going up. And I can't actually find any problem with this theory, but it's not a theory that many Egyptologists have put a lot of attention to. It was featured in a 1997 PBS documentary, and there's an academic paper explaining the physics and why it would be technically possible. So next slide. Now we come to really the hero of this story, JeanPierre Houdin, a French architect who's dedicated the last 15 years of his life to investigating how he thinks the pyramid was constructed. So his father, Henry, watched a documentary about the ramp theories but decided that they weren't credible and came up with his own theory of an internal spiral ramp going around the pyramid. He shared this theory with his son, JeanPierre, who noted that you can't have it as a spiral because you put too much pressure on the one side of the block, and it wouldn't work for that reason. Next slide. So JeanPierre came across this 1986 microgravimetric scan, which was looking for a hidden chamber behind the King's Pyramid. They didn't find a hidden chamber, and the results were ignored until JeanPierre found them. So what this study found was that there's void spaces inside the pyramid, spaces where there's subdensity, and then when mapped in 3D, it shows that they go around the outside of the pyramid at a 7-degree angle. Next slide. And you can actually see on the outside of the pyramid white lines towards the top that go at a 7-degree angle. Next slide. And one of these lines meets this notch about 2/3 of the way up. And then in a documentary, one Egyptologist, Bob Breyer, actually got permission to climb the pyramid and film inside there. Unfortunately, he didn't take a thermal camera with him, so he couldn't get any conclusive proof. But it did really provide the emphasis, and it sort of inspired the public's imagination. So basically, these notches in the internal ramp would be used to turn the blocks. They'd be lifted, rotated, and placed down, and they'd also provide ventilation for the workers. And JeanPierre also explains a possible explanation of the Grand Gallery. So in order to lift the 60-ton granite blocks, you'd use a counterweight inside the Grand Gallery. So you put a block in a trolley which would run on wooden planks between the two benches. And then if you look carefully, you can see slots in the benches which may have been used to secure the planks. And actually at the top of the Grand Gallery, in the Great Step, there you can see this V shape, which has since been concreted, but they didn't know about this idea. But that might be an explanation for provide space for ropes, which then go up to the top of the pyramid, and then workers in the first for the first third of the height of the pyramid, there would be an external ramp, and then the final third, So the first third height would be a ramp, then the final 2/3 would be an internal ramp. And so for the first third, rather than requiring 600 men to pull the 60-ton granite block, you'd only need 100 men using the counterweight system, which is more plausible. So for the past 7 years, JeanPierre has been trying to get permission to do a proper thermal scan of the pyramid. And then, to my surprise, literally the day after I decided to do this, there's actually news on the BBC website that for this 2015-16 operation Scan Pyramids, which combines French, Japanese and German teams using a variety of tools, thermal imaging, something called muon radiation scanning, which is using the subatomic particles to see inside. That was used at Fukushima. And what they found several thermal anomalies at the Great Pyramid. So at the base, there's these 3 blocks, which are 6 degrees warmer during sunset and sunrise when these stones are made. And that can only be the result of an internal void space or air currents. So it's an exciting time for news. And they're likely to find more internal spaces that weren't previously known. All right, so in summary, the Khufu pyramid, as well as being the tallest, has the most complex internal structure. It's estimated that it took 20,000 skilled workers 20 years to construct. Previous theories are deemed implausible, but there's 2 which I can't find any solid evidence why they're implausible, and there's a good chance of discovery soon.